Commander Alan Hayes rubbed his temples and stared at the blank screen in front of him. The most important day of his career, possibly the most important day in human history, and the coffee synthesizer was broken. Of all the equipment that could malfunction on the Earth Alliance vessel Stargazer, it had to be the coffee machine. "Status report on the synthesizer?" he asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in his voice. Lieutenant Susan Grant looked up from her tablet and shook her head. "Engineering says at least 2 hours, sir. The main calibration unit is completely fried." Hayes groaned and leaned back in his chair. In less than 30 minutes, they would be hosting the first official diplomatic meeting between humans and the Vexillian Confederation. 6 months of careful communication had led to this moment. The treaty they hoped to sign would open up 3 new star systems for human exploration and establish humanity as a serious player in galactic politics. And he would have to do it without coffee. "The Vexillians won't care if we're caffeinated, or not," said Communications Officer Ben Murphy, who never drank coffee and couldn't understand why everyone was so upset. "They probably don't even know what caffeine is." "That's not the point," Hayes said. "We've been preparing for this meeting for weeks. Everyone's been pulling double shifts. Half the crew hasn't slept properly in days." Susan nodded. "I'm already getting reports of headaches from regular coffee drinkers. Withdrawal symptoms starting." Hayes stood up and paced around the small conference room. "Contact engineering. Tell Officer Morgan I don't care what he has to do, but I need that synthesizer working in 1 hour, not 2. "Yes, sir," Susan said, already sending the message. The Stargazer wasn't a large ship by Earth Alliance standards, but it had been chosen for this mission because of its advanced communication systems and the diverse expertise of its crew. Hayes had personally selected each member, from xenobiologists to cultural specialists. Everything had been planned perfectly, except for the coffee. 10 minutes until the Vexillian shuttle docks, Ben announced. Hayes took a deep breath. "Okay, we can do this. We're professionals." He looked at his small team. "If anyone asks, the coffee synthesizer is undergoing routine maintenance. We don't need aliens knowing about our caffeine dependency on day 1. The team nodded, but Hayes could see they were all feeling it. The sluggishness, the dull headache at the base of the skull, the slightly slower response time, all the classic signs of humans who needed their morning coffee. When the elegant 6-limbed Ambassador Kreltix and her delegation arrived in the conference room, Hayes put on his best diplomatic smile. "Ambassador, welcome aboard the Stargazer. We are honored by your presence." The tall, blue-skinned alien bowed slightly, her upper limbs forming a complex gesture that the cultural specialists had told Hayes meant respect and openness. Her large eyes, with their distinctive horizontal pupils, studied the humans carefully. "The honor is shared, Commander Hayes," she said, her translator converting her musical language into flat English. "The Vexillian Confederation looks forward to establishing formal relations with the humans of Earth." The meeting began well enough. Both sides exchanged formal greetings and stated their hopes for cooperation. But as they moved into the actual treaty points, things began to unravel. Hayes found himself reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing its meaning. Susan kept rubbing her forehead. Even their legal expert, who had memorized the entire treaty, asked the Vexillians to repeat a simple question twice. Ambassador Kreltix tilted her head, a gesture their briefing materials hadn't covered. "Is something wrong, Commander? Your team seems diminished since our preliminary communications." Hayes opened his mouth to deny it, but then realized this might be an opportunity. "Ambassador, I apologize for our reduced efficiency. We are experiencing a minor technical issue that has disrupted our morning routine. I would like to request a short recess of perhaps 2 hours to resolve this matter." The 4 Vexillians in the room all made the same gesture, touching their middle limbs together in what Hayes would later learn was an expression of confusion. "This is unexpected," Kreltix said. "Our schedule was quite specific. Is this technical issue serious?" "Not serious, but significant for human functioning." Susan jumped in. "Our coffee synthesizer is malfunctioning." The translator seemed to struggle with the word coffee, eventually leaving it untranslated. Kreltix's confusion visibly deepened. "What is this coffee that affects your functioning?" she asked. Ben Murphy cleared his throat. "It's a beverage containing a mild stimulant that helps humans maintain optimal alertness and cognitive function. Many of us consume it daily as part of our work routine." Now the Vexillians were making a new gesture, their upper limbs weaving in and out in a pattern that reminded Hayes of knitting. He had no idea what it meant, but it didn't seem positive. "You require a chemical stimulant to function properly during diplomatic negotiations?" Kreltix asked, her translator somehow managing to convey both curiosity and concern. "Not require exactly," Hayes said, feeling the situation slipping away from him. "It's more of a cultural and biological preference." "I see," the ambassador said, though it was clear she didn't. "If you need this recess for your biological requirements, we will of course accommodate. The Confederation values understanding the needs of potential allies." Hayes felt a wave of relief. "Thank you, Ambassador. We appreciate your flexibility." As the Vexillians filed out of the conference room, he couldn't help noticing they were communicating rapidly among themselves, with many gestures he hadn't seen before. "That could have gone better," Susan said, once they were alone. Before Hayes could respond, his communicator beeped. It was Peter Morgan from engineering. "Good news, and bad news, Commander," Morgan said. "Good news is we can get the synthesizer working in an hour. Bad news is it'll only produce at 20% capacity for the next 12 hours. Hayes sighed. "Do what you can, Morgan. We need that coffee." What Hayes didn't know was that in the Vexillian shuttle, Ambassador Kreltix was sending an urgent message to her superiors. The message contained two critical pieces of information. First, that humans apparently required chemical substances to function properly, and second, that they had just demonstrated a potential weakness that could be exploited in future negotiations. The first interstellar coffee crisis had begun. 6 months after the coffee incident on the Stargazer, newly appointed human ambassador Olivia Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle onto the gleaming floor of Galactic Council headquarters. The massive space station orbited a neutral star at the intersection of 7 major species territories. It was humanity's first time being invited inside, and Martinez felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "Remember to breathe," her assistant Frank Calloway whispered. "They're just aliens with fancy titles." Martinez shot him a look. "Fancy titles who control access to 57 star systems we want to explore." She smoothed down her formal Earth Alliance uniform and checked that her translator was working properly. The device, small and sleek against her collar, blinked green. Her first action as humanity's official representative would be to sign the treaty that Commander Hayes had started negotiating half a year ago. It should have been a simple procedure, but nothing involving aliens was ever simple. A tall, green-skinned being with 4 arms approached them. "Ambassador Martinez," it said through its own translator. "I am Council Facilitator Zorn. Welcome to Council Headquarters." Martinez bowed slightly, exactly the right depth according to the protocol briefings. "Thank you, Facilitator. Earth is honored by this opportunity." Zorn led them through wide corridors filled with representatives from dozens of species. Some walked on legs, others slithered, and a few floated in special gravity fields. Frank looked like he might faint from excitement. "The treaty signing will take place in Chamber 7, Zorn explained. "The Council's legal team has prepared the final document based on the preliminary agreement your Commander Hayes negotiated." "Excellent," Martinez said. "We're eager to formalize our relationship with the Galactic Council." Zorn's face made a movement that might have been a smile. "There is just one small addition the Council insisted upon." "Nothing problematic, I assure you." Martinez felt a prickle of worry. In diplomacy, small additions were rarely small. "What kind of addition?" "You will see at the signing. It's simply an acknowledgement of a cultural difference. Actually, it might amuse you." They arrived at Chamber 7, where representatives from the Council's 12 founding species sat in a semicircle. Martinez recognized the blue-skinned Vexillian ambassador Kreltix among them. In the center of the room was a table with an impressive stack of papers, actual physical papers, a council tradition for important treaties. After formal introductions, the council speaker, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a bear, gestured toward the treaty. Ambassador Martinez, we present the finalized membership agreement for Earth's admission to the Galactic Council as an associate member. Please review it before signing. Martinez nodded to Frank, who stepped forward to collect the document. He was not just her assistant, but also a lawyer specializing in interspecies law. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying every clause of the preliminary agreement. Frank began flipping through the pages, comparing them with the copy in his tablet. After a few minutes, his eyebrows shot up. Ambassador, you might want to look at this. Martinez leaned over. Frank was pointing to Section 47B, a part that definitely hadn't been in the original draft. It read, "In recognition of the human biological and cultural requirement for the substance known as coffee to achieve optimal cognitive function, all member species acknowledge the human right to postpone any negotiation, deliberation, or binding agreement until such time as the human representatives have consumed an adequate amount of this substance. No treaty, contract, or accord shall be considered binding upon human representatives if it can be demonstrated that they had not completed their coffee consumption ritual prior to agreement." Martinez blinked several times. Is this some kind of joke? The council speaker made a gurgling sound that the translator interpreted as polite confusion. Not at all, Ambassador. We take all biological necessities of member species very seriously. The Vexillian delegation was quite insistent about including this clause after their experience with your Commander Hayes. Martinez glanced at Ambassador Kreltix, who made the Vexillian gesture for formal acknowledgement. It was clear during our first meeting that humans require this substance for proper function, Kreltix said. We would not wish any future agreement to be compromised by a lack of, what is your term? Coffee break? Frank leaned close to Martinez and whispered, "This is actually brilliant. They've just given us a legal loophole to delay or back out of any agreement by claiming we weren't properly caffeinated." Martinez kept her face neutral, though she wanted to laugh. The misunderstanding from the Stargazer had somehow transformed into an official diplomatic advantage. She wondered if Hayes had any idea what his coffee crisis had created. "The Council finds this arrangement acceptable?" she asked, wanting to confirm that all species had agreed to this strange clause. The speaker made an affirmative gesture. All member species have their unique biological requirements. The Ryloth need their environment misted with saline solution every 4 hours. The Graktal must stand in natural light for at least 20 minutes per day. Your coffee requirement is now similarly acknowledged. Martinez nodded solemnly, though inside she was amazed at how a simple misunderstanding had turned into official galactic policy. Earth accepts this recognition of our cultural practice. The signing proceeded without further issues, and Earth became the newest associate member of the Galactic Council. As they left the chamber, Frank couldn't contain his amusement any longer. "The caffeine clause," he chuckled. "That's what they're calling it back home. Wait until the diplomats at Earth HQ hear it's official now." Martinez smiled. "If alien species believe humans need coffee to think clearly, perhaps we should let them keep thinking that." 2 weeks later, Martinez found herself facing representatives of the militaristic Drav hegemony. The Drav were known for their aggressive expansion and hard bargaining tactics. She had deliberately scheduled the meeting for early morning, station time. When the tall, armor-plated Drav negotiators entered the room, Martinez and her team appeared sluggish and disorganized. She spoke slowly, seemed to lose her train of thought, and called for a brief recess after just 30 minutes. "Coffee break," she explained to the confused Drav. "Section 47B. When they returned 20 minutes later, the transformation was dramatic. Martinez's arguments became razor-sharp. Her team worked in perfect coordination. By the end of the session, the Drav had agreed to terms far more favorable to Earth than they had initially offered. As they left, Martinez overheard one Drav say to another, "Never negotiate with humans before they've had their coffee." The caffeine clause had claimed its first diplomatic victory. Station Commander Diane Kelly stood at the large viewing window of Gateway Station, watching ships come and go. In the 2 years since Earth had joined the Galactic Council, This station had become the busiest human outpost in space. Ships from 17 different alien species docked here every day to trade goods and information, and increasingly to trade coffee. "Commander, the observation lounge is ready for the Martosian delegation," said her assistant. Kelly nodded. "Thank you, Paul. I'll be there shortly." She took one last look at the spectacular view of stars and spacecraft before heading to what had become Gateway Station's most unusual feature, the Java Junction. The Java Junction was a special observation lounge Kelly had ordered built 6 months ago. It had comfortable seating for various alien body types, excellent viewing screens, and one wall made of transparent material that looked into the station's main mess hall. Every morning, aliens gathered in this lounge to watch humans drink their first coffee of the day. To humans, it might have seemed strange or even insulting to be observed like animals in a zoo. But Kelly understood the diplomatic value. The mysterious human transformation after coffee had become famous throughout council space. When Kelly entered the observation lounge, the 5 Martosian diplomats were already settled on their floating cushions. The Martosians were small, purple beings who communicated through color changes in their skin as well as words. "Greetings, Station Commander," their leader said, skin flashing blue with respect. "We appreciate this opportunity to observe the coffee ritual before our trade discussions. We're happy to share our culture," Kelly replied with a smile. "The morning coffee rush will begin in about 5 minutes." On cue, humans began filing into the mess hall. Many looked tired, moving slowly, speaking little. They lined up at the coffee dispensers along one wall. The Martosians watched with fascination as the first humans received their drinks, some black, some with cream or sugar, and took their first sips. "Watch that group of engineers by the far table," Kelly suggested, pointing to several people in blue uniforms. "They've been working night shift and are about to go off duty." The Martosians' attention shifted to the engineers, who were slumped in their chairs, barely talking. As they drank their coffee, a visible change came over them. They sat straighter. Their voices grew louder. They began to laugh and talk animatedly. "Remarkable," the Martosian leader whispered, their skin now pulsing with orange wonder. "The chemical truly transforms your species." Kelly didn't correct their misunderstanding. The transformation was mostly the normal human transition from tired to alert, perhaps exaggerated a bit for the benefit of their audience, but the mystique of coffee had become too valuable to dispel completely. "If you find our coffee ritual interesting, you might want to observe our junior diplomat Eric Washington," Kelly suggested. "He's somewhat famous for his morning transformation." The Martosian skin flickered with excitement. "The 3-cup diplomat? We have heard of him." Kelly hid her smile. Eric Washington had become an unintentional celebrity in galactic diplomatic circles. His habit of drinking 3 cups of coffee in succession before important meetings, and his dramatic change from barely coherent to eloquently persuasive, had been recorded and shared across galactic networks. Some species now believed that coffee gave humans temporary telepathic abilities or enhanced intelligence. The truth was simpler. Eric was terrible at waking up early and needed more caffeine than most. But his reputation had helped him secure several favorable trade agreements. "Look, there he is now," Kelly said, pointing to a young man who had just shuffled into the mess hall looking like he had barely woken up. The Martosians watched in fascination as Eric went through his famous routine. 1 cup of coffee drunk quickly while standing, followed by a 2nd cup drunk more slowly while checking his tablet, and finally a 3rd cup sipped thoughtfully as he reviewed his notes for the day. By the 3rd cup, Eric was talking with colleagues, gesturing energetically, completely transformed from his zombie-like entrance. The Martosian's skin was flashing rapidly between colors of amazement, respect, and a little fear. "We understand now why the caffeine clause exists," the Martosian leader said. "It would be unfair to negotiate with humans in their pre-coffee state." "We appreciate your understanding," Kelly replied diplomatically. What she didn't say was that Earth's diplomats had become expert at using aliens' misconceptions about coffee to their advantage. Some even pretended to be more affected by caffeine than they really were, deliberately appearing groggy. then suddenly switching on after their coffee break to throw off their negotiating partners. Later that day, Kelly received an urgent message from Security Chief Jack Wilson. "Commander, we've detected unusual scanning patterns directed at Agricultural Dome 3, Wilson reported. "The pattern suggests someone is trying to gather detailed information about what's growing there." Kelly frowned. Agricultural Dome 3 was where they grew experimental coffee plants, trying to develop varieties that could thrive in different environments. The project was considered sensitive but not classified. "Can you identify the source?" she asked. "We believe it's coming from the Procyon trade vessel that docked yesterday," Wilson said. "They requested a standard trade meeting, but this suggests they have other interests." The Procyon Empire was one of the few major powers that remained outside the Galactic Council. They were known for their technological prowess and somewhat secretive nature. Until now, they had shown little interest in human affairs. "Increase security around the agricultural domes," Kelly ordered, "and get me everything we have on Procyon interests in human biology or agriculture." That evening, Kelly reviewed the security reports in her office. The evidence was clear. The Procyons were specifically interested in human coffee production. They had also made discreet inquiries about human behavior, before and after caffeine consumption. She opened a secure channel to Earth Alliance headquarters. This wasn't just about foreign curiosity anymore. If the Procyons were studying coffee as a way to understand human behavior, they might also be looking for ways to exploit the human relationship with caffeine. "This is Commander Kelly, Gateway Station," she said when the secure line connected. "I need to speak with intelligence about a potential security concern. It appears the Procyon Empire is showing unusual interest in our coffee production facilities." The T officer on the other end of the line paused before responding. "Commander Kelly, please stand by for Chief Intelligence Officer Reeves. This has just become a priority matter." Kelly raised her eyebrows in surprise. If her coffee concerns warranted immediate attention from the Chief Intelligence Officer, then perhaps the situation was even more serious than she had thought. A new voice came on the line. "Commander Kelly, this is Nathan Reeves. Tell me everything you know about the Procyon interest in our coffee. Leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." As Kelly shared her observations, she realized that what had started as a humorous misunderstanding about human coffee habits had somehow evolved into a matter of interstellar security. The coffee war had begun before it had even been declared. Chief Intelligence Officer Nathan Reeves adjusted his disguise one last time before entering the Procyon research facility. His skin had been temporarily tinted to the pale green shade common among Procyon scientists, and subtle facial prosthetics altered his human features just enough to pass casual inspection. The hardest part had been learning to imitate the stiff formal body language of the Procyons. 3 months of intensive preparation had led to this moment. After Commander Kelly's discovery of Procyon interest in Earth's coffee production, Alliance intelligence had launched a full investigation. What they found was disturbing enough to warrant this dangerous infiltration mission. "Remember, you're Dr. Leon Stewart, a human caffeine researcher willing to sell out Earth for the right price," said the voice in his nearly invisible earpiece. "The Procyons believe you've been in contact with their agent for weeks." "Understood," Reeves whispered as he approached the security checkpoint. He presented the forged credentials that intelligence had prepared, along with genetic samples that would read as human on Procyon scanners. The guard, a tall Procyon with the characteristic ridge running from forehead to neck, examined the credentials carefully. "Purpose of visit?" "Meeting with Research Director Klon regarding human caffeine dependency studies," Reeves replied in the clipped tones Procyons preferred. The guard nodded and waved him through. Reeves let out a small breath of relief. First hurdle cleared. His escort, a junior researcher named Tallow, led him through sterile white hallways deeper into the facility. "Director Klon is very interested in your research on human cognitive fluctuations during caffeine cycles," Tallow said. "Few humans are willing to acknowledge such a significant species weakness." Reeves gave what he hoped was a convincing shrug. "Science matters more than patriotism. Besides, humans are foolish to think they can hide such an obvious vulnerability." The research facility was larger than intelligence reports had suggested. As they walked, Reeves carefully noted the layout, marking emergency exits and security checkpoints. They passed several laboratories where Procyon scientists worked at advanced equipment. Through one doorway, he glimpsed something that made him nearly break character: rows of earth coffee plants growing under specialized lights. Finally, they reached Director Klon's office. The director was older than most Procyons Reeves had seen, with a faded ridge and calculating eyes. "Dr. Stewart," Klon said, not rising from behind his desk, "I've been looking forward to meeting the human willing to share such valuable insights about his species." "Director," Reeves nodded, "I've brought the caffeine sensitivity data you requested, along with my analysis of withdrawal symptoms in diplomatic personnel." Klon gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Tell me, what motivates a human to betray such a significant strategic advantage?" It was a test, Reeves knew. His cover story needed to be believable. "My research funding was cut. Politics over science. The Alliance doesn't take the caffeine dependency seriously enough, but I can see the Procyon Empire recognizes its true significance." Klon studied him for a long moment, then seemed satisfied. "Indeed we do. Would you like to see what your preliminary data has helped us achieve?" This was what Reeves had come for. "Very much." They left the office and walked to a secure laboratory that required Klon's eye scan and voice recognition to enter. Inside, Reeves struggled to maintain his composure. The lab was devoted entirely to coffee research, but on a scale he hadn't imagined possible. Dozens of coffee varieties grew in specialized environmental chambers. Screens displayed chemical formulas and biological analyses. In one section, Procyon scientists were extracting compounds from coffee beans and testing them on tissue samples. "This is impressive," Reeves said, genuinely amazed. "We've acquired every significant coffee variety from Earth and its colonies," Klon explained with obvious pride. "We've analyzed their chemical properties and effects on human physiology. But your data on how caffeine withdrawal affects human decision-making was the missing piece." Klon led him to another section of the lab, where a clear liquid bubbled in a distillation apparatus. "This is our greatest achievement, Dr. Stewart. A compound that neutralizes caffeine's effects in humans for up to 72 hours after exposure." Reeves felt a chill. "Completely neutralizes?" "Complete caffeine immunity. The human drinks coffee but receives none of its effects. No increased alertness. No improved cognitive function." Klon's expression was as close to a smile as Procyon's ever showed. "Imagine a human negotiator who believes they have consumed their required coffee, yet remains in what you call their pre-coffee state. The diplomatic implications would be significant," Reeves acknowledged, working to keep his voice steady. This was worse than intelligence had feared, a direct attempt to undermine human diplomatic capabilities. "More than significant, Dr. Stewart. It could reshape the balance of power. The humans have been using their supposed coffee weakness as a negotiation tactic. But what happens when the coffee ritual no longer functions as expected? When treaties are signed by humans who think they are at full capacity, but are actually impaired?" Over the next hour, Klon showed him more of the facility, revealing the extent of Procyon research on coffee and human biology. They had even tested various countermeasures on human tissue samples, though not yet on living subjects. "Your contribution will accelerate our timeline considerably," Klon said, as they returned to his office. "We'll need additional data, of course. Brain scans of humans before and after coffee consumption would be particularly valuable." "I believe I can acquire those," Reeves said, "but such high-level medical data will require more substantial compensation." While they negotiated, Reeves carefully placed a tiny data collection device under the edge of Klon's desk, standard intelligence technology that would copy any files accessed on Klon's computer system. As they finalized the arrangement for Reeves's next delivery of human data, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. "Security breach in Section 7, announced a computerized voice. Klon's communicator buzzed. His expression darkened as he listened to the message. "It seems we have an unauthorized access attempt in our agricultural section," he said, studying Reeves with new suspicion. How strange that it would occur during your visit, Dr. Stewart. Reeves knew his cover was about to be blown. Section 7 was where his extraction team was supposed to create a diversion, but they were early. He had minutes, maybe seconds, complete. Coincidence, I assure you, he said calmly, while pressing a hidden button on his wrist device that would signal the team he needed immediate extraction. Klon was reaching for his security button when Reeves moved. Years of field training took over as he vaulted the desk, stunning Klon with a precise strike before the director could sound the alarm. Working quickly, Reeves used Klon's unconscious body to activate the security systems, downloading as much research data as possible. Most importantly, he grabbed a sample vial of the caffeine-neutralizing compound. Alarms continued to blare as he slipped into the corridor, heading toward the rendezvous point. He'd memorized the facility layout, but security personnel were now flooding the hallways. Extraction team status, he whispered into his communicator. In position at exit point B, came the reply from Captain Ashley Rodriguez. Bringing extraction vehicle online now. You have 4 minutes, Reeves. He turned a corner and nearly ran into 2 Procyon guards. There was no time for subtlety. He disabled them with quick strikes and continued running. The facility was now on full lockdown. Ahead, he saw the doors to his exit route closing automatically. Reeves sprinted, diving through the narrowing gap just before the heavy doors sealed. 3 more corridors to go. Behind him, he heard the facility's self-destruct sequence begin its countdown. The Procyons were willing to destroy their own research rather than let it fall into human hands. Admiral Gregory Patterson straightened his formal Earth Alliance uniform and took a deep breath. The large circular chamber around him buzzed with activity as representatives from 17 different species took their places. This day would go down in galactic history as the first ever coffee summit. 10 years had passed since Chief Intelligence Officer Reeves' dramatic escape from the Procyon research facility. That mission had changed everything. The evidence Reeves recovered had shocked the Galactic Council. The idea that one species would research ways to exploit another's biological needs violated several Council principles. The Procyon Empire had denied everything, of course, but the data and the sample of caffeine-neutralizing compound were irrefutable proof. The diplomatic fallout had been enormous. "Ready, Admiral?" asked Dr. Laura Bennett, Earth's leading agricultural scientist and coffee expert. Patterson nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be to explain humanity's relationship with coffee to the entire galaxy." Bennett smiled. Her work developing enhanced coffee plants that could grow in varied environments had become vital to human expansion. The plants now thrived on 6 colony worlds, freeing humanity from reliance on synthesizers in deep space. "Just remember," she said, "today isn't about keeping secrets anymore, it's about building understanding." The summit was being held on neutral territory, a beautiful space station constructed specifically for this purpose in orbit around an uninhabited planet. The station's design incorporated elements from all participating species' architecture, making everyone feel equally welcome and uncomfortable. As Earth's senior diplomat, Patterson had been chosen to lead the human delegation. His mission was delicate demystify coffee while maintaining the strategic advantage of being underestimated. The session was called to order by a Vexillian moderator, Ambassador Kreltix herself, now elevated to High Diplomat of the Confederation. It seemed fitting that the being who had started this whole coffee saga would help bring it to resolution. "Representatives of all worlds," Kreltix began, her translator conveying her musical language perfectly. "We gather today to address what has become a matter of galactic security, the human relationship with coffee and how it affects interstellar diplomacy." Patterson listened as speakers from various species outlined their concerns. Some were scientific, wondering about the biological basis for human caffeine dependency. Others were diplomatic, suggesting that the famous caffeine clause gave humans an unfair advantage in negotiations. A few were even philosophical, questioning whether a species that required chemical stimulation was truly reliable as an ally. When it was his turn to speak, Patterson stood and walked to the center of the chamber. He carried with him a large container that had raised many curious eyebrows when his team brought it in. "Distinguished representatives," he began, For 10 years, humanity's relationship with coffee has been the subject of rumor, speculation, and even espionage. Today I hope to bring clarity. He opened the container to reveal a portable coffee station with enough supplies to serve everyone present. I propose we begin these talks with a coffee ceremony. Every representative will have the opportunity to experience what humans experience each morning. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some representatives looked eager, others nervous. The Drav representative, whose species had particularly rigid ideas about chemical purity, looked horrified. "This is irregular," the moderator noted. But Patterson could see Kreltix's curiosity in her body language. "Perhaps," Patterson agreed. "But how can we discuss something so central to human culture without experiencing it firsthand?" After some discussion, the motion was approved. Dr. Bennett began preparing the coffee while Patterson explained the process: the grinding of roasted beans, the hot water extraction, the various additions humans might include based on personal preference. "Coffee is more than a stimulant," he explained as the rich aroma filled the chamber. "It's a social ritual, a cultural touchstone, and yes, a mild performance enhancer." As cups were distributed to those willing to try, with appropriate modifications for different biologies, Patterson continued his explanation. "The truth about coffee is both simpler and more complex than the myths that have developed. Coffee contains caffeine, which does increase human alertness and improve certain cognitive functions when we are tired, but it doesn't transform us into different beings." He sipped his own coffee, black, no sugar, before continuing. "What aliens have observed as the coffee transformation is simply the human transition from tired to alert, something most species experience in their own way. Our dependency is partly physical, yes, but mostly psychological and cultural." Around the chamber, representatives were cautiously tasting their coffee. Reactions ranged from delight to disgust, with several being somewhere in between. "The caffeine clause exists because of a misunderstanding during first contact," Patterson explained. "And yes, human diplomats have occasionally used it to strategic advantage. But we've never used coffee, or lack thereof, to sign treaties we didn't intend to honor." The Procyon representative seated apart from the main group spoke up. "Yet you maintain this clause that gives humans special privileges in negotiations." Patterson nodded. "Just as the Ryloth maintain their right to saline misting and the Graktal require natural light exposure. Every species has biological and cultural needs. The difference is that humans acknowledge ours openly." Over the next several hours, the discussion deepened. Scientists shared data on caffeine's actual effects on human biology. Diplomats debated the ethics of using biological needs in negotiations. Dr. Bennett explained how coffee plants had evolved on Earth and how humans had spread them to the stars. By the end of the day, a new understanding was emerging. The Assembly drafted what would become known as the Coffee Accord, which acknowledged both the cultural significance of stimulant beverages across species and established protocols to prevent exploitation of any species' biological or cultural needs during negotiations. The caffeine clause remained in diplomatic protocols, but was now seen as just one of many accommodations for species-specific needs, rather than a special human advantage. As the summit concluded, each delegation presented samples of their own species' traditional beverages for others to study and possibly enjoy. It was a gesture of newfound understanding that pleased Patterson deeply. When most representatives had departed, Patterson found himself alone with Ambassador Kreltix, the Vexillian whose confusion about coffee had started this whole journey 10 years ago. "A successful outcome, Admiral Patterson," she said, "though I must confess something to you." "What's that, Ambassador?" Kreltix made the Vexillian gesture for mild embarrassment. "I have begun each day with a cup of human coffee for the past 3 years. I find its effect on Vexillian biology quite pleasant." Patterson laughed. "And I have a confession as well, that Vexillian sunrise tea you introduced me to at the last council meeting. I've been drinking it every evening since." Kreltix's large eyes showed what Patterson had learned to recognize as amusement. "Perhaps true diplomacy begins when we understand each other's rituals, not just words." Patterson raised his coffee cup in a toast. To understanding, one cup at a time. As their cups clinked together, Patterson reflected on how far interspecies relations had come. A simple misunderstanding about a morning beverage had nearly led to interstellar conflict, but had ultimately created deeper understanding between vastly different beings. And all because the humans needed to finish their coffee first.